Hello, this is Tim Wotton, that's Cotton with a W. Welcome to the GIF podcast, which focuses on the power of the mind and being more present to overcome life and health challenges, which helps to bring more resilience, calm, and joy. Today, I have a wonderful guest with me. His name is Paul McGee. He is a Sunday Times best-selling author, international speaker, and creator of the SUMO brand, an avid football fan who has also worked with elite sports people. He is known as the SUMO Guy. He'll tell you why and offer his insights in dealing with life and health challenges. Hi, Paul. Welcome to the show. It's a real honor to have you with me.
Tim, it's really good to be with you, mate.
Now, I've read a couple of your books, and we'll sort of delve into them as we discuss your sumo approach and many other approaches. But one thing that I really am drawn to with you is that you're a real wordsmith. You've got some wonderful acronyms that I now use, and also coping techniques that I use in my daily life with friends, both in a social format, but also when people are having tough times, and myself when battling with my cystic fibrosis and my diabetes and mental anxiety. I bring out certain strategies that you have, and it gives me a chance to actually, on my show, say thank you, because a lot of people must use your techniques, and then you'll never hear about them in the real time. So today gives me a chance to say thank you. So my question to start off with is, were you always quite a good with wordsmithing and playing with words? Is that something that was natural to you?
I think I've definitely been a speaker rather than a writer initially. I think, at school, I liked English, was good at drama. Lots of people in sport like to play me because it would do their confidence good, because they'd invariably beat me. But no, I think it's really been a question, Tim, of things evolving for me. And I would say a lot of what I write about, the reason why some people, not everyone, is a fan of my writing style, but I suppose there's two things that have inspired my writing style. Number one is, on one level, I'm not the brightest light bulb in the box. So for me, I have to wrestle with an idea and a concept and get it really clear in my mind. It doesn't come always automatically and immediately. So what that means is, once I've grasped an idea, and I'm also very much a pragmatist, when I see how that idea applies to me, I simplify it in a way that I can understand.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, what I do in my writing and my speaking is, I guess I kind of do simplify things. Hopefully don't make things too simplistic, but I'm a great believer that if you want to make an impact in your message, it needs to be sticky and memorable. So I guess I do work hard at thinking, I'm very good at forgetting things, and I struggle to grasp things immediately. So what can I do to make things sticky and memorable and simple? And that's, I suppose, the catalyst for how I tend to write and speak.
Okay. Now, would I be right in thinking that someone like Dale Carnegie is an influence on you?
You would actually, yes. When I lost my job through ill health many years ago, through ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome. And after about 3 years, I thought I was well enough maybe to go back into the world of work, but only on a part-time basis. My challenge was I couldn't get a job doing anything because no one had hired me because I couldn't pass a medical. So I always say I hired myself. I was flipping amazing at the interview. But actually what happened was, when I became self-employed in 1991, I did work for the Dale Carnegie training organization, and I spent just over a year working with them, trying to promote their courses. And so I did their Dale Carnegie courses, and also read the two main Dale Carnegie books, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Now, I would not have revisited those books for maybe, it could well be almost 20 years. But I guess it's a great question to start off with, Tim, because, in many ways, I guess as I look back on my career and how I communicate, you would say, the seeds of Carnegie very much took root and flourished within my kind of DNA and perhaps have influenced me more than I perhaps even have realized.
Well, it's not just the way you speak, which I've always been drawn to, but actually I do and am an advocate of your written style. And as a communications professional, I dumb things down because if I can't understand it and explain it to my 12-year-old son, God forbid trying to make it too intellectual. Maybe we're similar in that respect.
I think it's very easy to want to impress people, and I'm not here to impress. I'm just here to hopefully share some stuff. And if you like it and you think it can help you, great. And if it's not for you, no worries. And I'm always remember coming across this phrase about if ever you've done karaoke, and I'll often ask my audience, has anyone ever done karaoke or been to a karaoke bar? And then I'll go, well, if you have, maybe you can relate to the following. Knowing the words to a song does not make you a great singer. And I think some people can be an expert in their topic, but they don't know how to communicate that expertise. So for me, it's not just been acquiring knowledge that's been really crucial to developing my business. It's also trying to think, how do I communicate that knowledge in a really engaging and hopefully inspiring and hopefully sometimes entertaining way?
Now, I said in my introduction, you're known as the sumo guy. Now, I think you're not, I mean, I'm not a terribly tall person. I don't get the impression you're 6'5", are you? So
that would be fair to say. That would be fair to say.
We've probably got a lot of crossover similarities.
Yeah. I'm the same height as Tom Cruise.
Yes.
Now he actually happens. Now he's not as short as everyone thinks, but he's 5'7",
isn't he?
Yeah. So I'm 5'7", whatever that is in centimeters. But yeah, 5'7".
So when you're booked as the sumo guy, I mean, most people will be, of course, mentally thinking of the wrestler size. And
yeah.
Your dear self comes in and you're looking immaculately slim and fit. So was that a bit of a disconnect? Oh, they were thinking of something different. So how did you develop sumo, and how long after 91 when you went solo did it happen?
Okay, I was running a training course in Glasgow in 2002, and the course, I can still remember the title of the course, was Coaching and Counseling Skills for Managers. Now, I don't actually remember if it was a male or female. I suspect it was a man, but I don't know for sure. But in the midst of me doing this course, some person then says, well, if all else fails, you can always tell them to sumo. And I went, sumo? And he went, well, they went, shut up, move on. The audience laughed. I laughed, thought nothing more of it. The next course, I happen to weave the story, I weave in the phrase sumo. And again, it makes a bit of a connection. And again, with a lot of things I do in life, Tim, it's not typically revolution, it's evolution. So I started to, at that point, I was talking about your inner critic and how we got to be careful and how we manage our inner critic. And what I started to then do is, in my talks, I'd go, we need to shut up our inner critic and move on and listen to our inner coach. So this catchphrase began to take hold a little bit, and people just seem to remember it and comment on it. And I guess going back to a previous point, yeah, it was a sticky and memorable phrase. And then what happened by about 2004, someone had said, you need to write a book called Sumo. And I remember saying, it's not even a paragraph, never mind a book. But I did have a number of ideas at that stage. And I suppose what I eventually did was make sumo became the umbrella term to describe a number of my ideas, which I then described as the sumo principles. And as we got involved in education, and as we also noticed that some people, even though the shut up bit isn't as aggressive as it sounds, it's more about press pause, take time out, stop, think and reflect. We did realize though that if we wanted to develop the brand, we sometimes had to reframe it in certain contexts. So as an acronym, although it typically still does stand for shut up, move on, it can now also stand for stop, understand, move on. And for some people, particularly maybe when you're working with children, that tends to be seen as a more palatable phrase for them to grasp. But the actual ideas themselves, the sumo principles, haven't changed. Just sometimes how I package it has.
Okay. You've never met the guy that came out with that sumo since, have you?
Well, no, I suspect it was a guy, but it could have been a woman. The thing is, when those words were uttered in that training course in a training room in Glasgow in 2002, I had no idea that 3 years later I'd be writing a book with the same title. So maybe sometimes life gives you an opportunity, and it's up to you to sometimes recognize it as an opportunity and run with it. But that evening, when I would have gone back to my hotel room, I wouldn't have thought, I think I've discovered something here that's amazing, and I'm going to develop a brand. It was just a phrase, and in many ways, what started to happen when I began to use the phrase was, again, I was almost doing some unintentional market research, because by using the phrase, I started to get feedback that people liked it, they'd remember it, and they'd start to use it themselves.
Okay, and some of the sumo principles I was looking to delve into to help my listeners around the power of the mind, but also being more present. If okay with you, Paul, can I delve into some of the ones that I think are super helpful for me
Yeah, sure.
around having more ability with the power of the mind? There's
Absolutely, Tim.
a
Fire away.
formula that I'm drawn to um, that helps influences our response to events. Would you be kind enough to tell listeners about this simple formula?
Yeah, I was in my little Ford Fiesta, 1.1 Ford Fiesta in 1992.
Goes like a treat, that thing.
Absolutely. And I'm there listening to, again, this ages me, listening to some audio cassettes in the car. And I'm listening to an audio program by a guy called Jack Canfield, who some people may know became a co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series.
Yeah.
And he just very briefly, didn't even go into much detail, mentioned this little formula, E plus R equals O. And he goes, it's not the event, it's how we respond or react that influences our outcome. And you can hear that and go, yeah, fair enough. Whatever reason, it was an absolute aha moment for me, because in my life, I realized up until then, when events happened to me, I realized in hindsight with a formula, E equals O. If that's the event, you know what the outcome's going to be. And what Canfield again began to sort of stir within me was this understanding and insight that no. Two people, two organizations, two families, two businesses can have the same event. You can have a health challenge, you can have a marketing opportunity, lots of things. We can all have the same event, but our outcome isn't purely based on the event. It's based on how we respond or react to it. E plus R equals O. And I spend a lot of my life now recognizing that some events I can control, but some I can't. The thing that I can control, though, is how I react or respond. And sometimes when I'm reacting, I'm going more from what I'd call my primitive emotional part of my brain, what Dr. Steve Peters would call more your chimp brain.
Yep.
And sometimes I'm not getting a great outcome. And it's easy to blame the event for the outcome. But hang on a minute, Paul, you're in this equation, you're in this formula. The event happened, but were you reacting, or did you think about how best to respond? So for me, that formula has made me think about being more proactive and intentional on how I do life, rather than always reacting to situations. And when things don't go right, blaming the event rather than looking at how I responded or reacted.
Okay. And maybe there's an example you can share of something that you put that own formula into practice.
Yeah, I remember getting an email from a relative who lives in Australia some years ago. And when I read the email, I felt angry, emotional, and wanting to throttle him. I was really upset. I was angry at the tone of his email and what he'd accused me of. But what I suddenly realized was if I reply immediately in the heat of the moment, there's a very good chance that when he gets my reply, our outcome will be that him and I are no longer speaking. And when he does come home at Christmas, to say it's going to be awkward is an understatement. So I was thinking, okay, I actually stepped back for a moment. I thought, okay, we have an email in an inbox. It's an event. But my outcome isn't purely based on his email. My outcome is based on my response to it. And I was very tempted to escalate the issue because I was feeling angry and emotional. But there's a quote from a book you may have come across by Stephen Covey, his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of his habits is begin with the end in mind. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, Paul, what do you want your outcome to be here? You have this email in your inbox. What do you want your outcome to be? And if you're comfortable with the fact that him and you may no longer be speaking, then send the email you want to send. But if that's not the outcome you want, then maybe you need to think about responding differently. So that whole thing about, okay, begin with the end in mind. What outcome do you want? And what happened was I chose to de-escalate the issue. And my brother came home that Christmas, and I met him at the airport, and we didn't sing Kumbaya back in the car on the way home, but we had a pretty good Christmas together. And a couple of years after that, I had probably one of the most challenging 12 months periods of my life. The only word I could use to describe those 12 months was the word horrendous. And yet my biggest support, even though he's still in Australia, was my brother. And I have reflected on the fact that if I'd have sent the email I initially wanted to send, he might not even be in my world anymore. So it's always a question of remembering, yes, there's an event, but your outcome isn't predetermined. It's the R factor. Are you going to react or respond to it?
And just like you, I'm a huge fan of Dale Carnegie, and How to Stop Worrying is full of stories of quite well-known people who fell out and then for life never ever spoke again because they didn't maybe follow the E+R=O formula.
Yeah, I think and coming back to more modern times, you mentioned in my introduction, I'm a football fan. And some of your listeners will remember a very controversial and enigmatic football manager called Brian Clough. But what's very interesting about Brian Clough was he always achieved his success alongside his assistant, and that was a guy called Peter Taylor. And they were both characters, but between them, they were just brilliant. What was interesting was they fell out, and Taylor went his way, Clough went his way. Clough never achieved as much success without him, and they fell out. And the real tragedy of it is Peter Taylor died at a time when him and Clough were no longer speaking. And in Brian Clough's autobiography, he actually talks about one of his regrets is how much he missed Peter Taylor and how he wishes they hadn't ended their relationship the way they had. And I think for a lot of us, we can have our regrets because, we have that phrase, strike whilst the iron's hot, which can be great sometimes. Carpe diem, seize the day. But there are occasions when you strike whilst the iron's hot, people get burnt. And Brian Clough's outcome was he was no longer speaking to Peter Taylor because they'd had a fallout, they'd had an event, but actually it was also about how they both responded. And I'm, mindful of all those kind of like those stories, and they are lessons for us to learn. Hopefully not by always committing the same mistake ourselves, but learning and reflecting on how other people have sometimes done life.
I completely agree. For someone who has a daily medical regime, as myself, with both cystic fibrosis and diabetes, my whole life has been a litany of understanding events that could happen to me. Now, it could be that I'm in an angry, foul mood at the hospital, and it's how I respond and keep myself in check with doctors. And because you see like a smorgasbord of different people that come into your room, and I work very hard, and it's not an act, to be as super helpful and friendly with each of them.
Yeah.
Rather than be the I think it's an acronym you use, Paul, one of my favorites, the BMW, bitch, a moaner, and a whiner. And I'm not a bitch, a moaner, and a whiner, and I work hard because my outcome at the end of the day is they work harder with me to try and keep me as healthy as possible. So it's just one way that I use that formula in a daily basis. Plus, forming habits is crucial for someone with hardship, whether it be health or life. And I certainly use that formula to make sure that I form and sustain positive habits around my medication, because I've got a lot every day, but also around how I mentally see the world, which brings me into one of your other fantastic SUMO principles, which is fruity thinking. And I've often felt with my research, understanding more about the power of the mind, who is the most important person you'll ever speak to? and I worked out about 10 years ago that it was myself. And I'd like you to please, Paul, just explain what you've learnt in that and how you help people.
Yeah, I think I'll often ask the question, my audience, besides God, if you believe in God, who's the most important person you're going to talk to? And it is yourself. And we're having conversations with ourselves all the time. You know, we'll frame the language to describe how those conversations is your attitude, your mindset, your self-talk, your inner dialogue, or your thinking. And so I share with my audience a very simplified little formula or process called the Seer Model or the Seer process. And the T stands for thinking, and I get people to understand that how they think can affect their emotions or how they feel. And how you think and feel can therefore actually influence how you act. So you've got your thinking, emotion, your actions, whatever those actions are, and ultimately you will get some results. So if you're going into a situation thinking, I can't do this or I don't want to be here, then that itself can impact how you feel, your emotions. You may be feeling stressed, anxious, disengaged. That can influence your actions. You know, you maybe don't get involved. Perhaps you've got to take on a new task. Maybe go to the gym for the first time and you're thinking, this, I don't want to be here, but my friends bullied me almost into coming. So I don't feel enthusiastic. When I get there, I think, oh, it's too hard. The machines are too difficult to learn. And I maybe try a couple of things and think, oh no, I'm tired out. That's too heavy. So my actions are, I quit fairly soon, and you get a result. If your thinking is, all right, I've not done this before, but I need to think about my long-term health and how this could benefit me, and I decide I'm not going to kind of like become Superman or Superwoman overnight, but I'm going to just plod away at it, get into a routine, then maybe that thinking can help you to feel differently. Your emotions are different, you act differently, and ultimately you get different results. So I'm trying to help people understand that results that we often get in life are very much influenced by how we think. And the results you get when you go, Tim, to the hospital, you're making a decision, you're making a choice with the way you think about how you're then going to ultimately act to behave with those doctors and nurses. And those actions you take will give you some results. And you could argue that there's a phrase, behavior begets behavior. So if I'm acting in a friendly, positive way to people, maybe that influences how they respond and deal with me as well. So the problem we have, though, with our thinking is I talk about we can get into faulty thinking. In other words, ways of thinking that can actually increase your stress and undermine your confidence. And, you know, suddenly you're going, whoa, what, I can increase my stress, yeah, and my anxiety, yeah, and you can also decrease your confidence and your motivation. And I unpack for people different types of faulty thinking. So one that I think I mentioned previously, your inner critic, you know, that voice inside your head that, yeah, highlights your weaknesses. And I'll often use a visual representation of your inner critic of being that red boxing glove. And how easy it is to beat ourselves up, to tell ourselves we can't do it, and not to have what I'd call kind, constructive conversations with ourselves. I also talk about the broken record. You know, we just go on and on about an issue, and it's like, is it okay to have a moan? Yes, it is. Having a moan can be healthy and helpful. But sometimes that broken record moaning goes on for too long, and it's like we need to put on a different song. And another type of faulty thinking I have is the martyr syndrome, and that is where we end up just being like a victim and spending our lives, another little acronym of mine, playing the BSE game, blame someone else. And again, going back to yourself, Tim, and other maybe listeners who've had some challenges in life, it's not your fault that you've got cystic fibrosis and diabetes. And what you could have responded to that is to be a bit of a martyr and to be a bit of a victim. And why me? But clearly by what you've done is you've thought, well, okay, I've had this event, this experience, but actually being a victim and being a martyr is not going to help me here. And so there's different types of faulty thinking that people have, and how I try and help people to move on from faulty to fruity thinking is I give people a set of questions for them to reflect on. So, and one of those questions is, okay, so where is this issue on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10's death? And suddenly you realize what stresses you out, what you beat yourself up about, what you moan about, what you feel sorry for yourself about. yeah, sometimes it could be pretty high up that scale, but very often it's probably less than a 3. And,
Yep.
and what I like about one of the other questions, and you're a role model of this, is one of my other questions is, how can I influence or improve the situation? And if you think about what you're doing with your podcast and with your book and your blogs, it's like, okay, I have got this event. I could wear the victim t-shirt. I could be a martyr. I could spend my life blaming someone else. I could, and send out invites to the pity party every day. But what you have chosen to do, and others listening to this podcast have chosen to do, is to go, okay, how am I going to best respond? How can I influence and improve this? And maybe there are lessons that I can learn from this experience that I can share to benefit other people. So that's a little bit of a very quick whistle-stop tour of why your thinking's important, but why we need to develop fruity thinking, because we often can get caught up in faulty thinking.
That's super helpful, and to hear it again, I'd never stop. I would never tire of hearing the way you explain things, and I use that 1 to 10 scale a lot, not just myself, but at work. I think people they see the red rag to the bull with an email, or someone's done something that's annoyed them, and I just go 1 to 10 scale. Where
Yeah.
does this fit? And actually, it just, not in a arrogant, oh gosh, I can't believe you're letting that wind you up. Just in a human way. Just use this scale for a second, just to park where this fits.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, we do recognize our humanity, and our primitive emotional part of our brain will be upset and will react. But the thing is, sometimes we're reacting to a 1 or a 2 as if it's an 8 or a 9, and the consequences are your stress makes you stupid. You can react, you can escalate things, you get upset, you can increase conflict, and it's like, whoa, what was this issue actually really all about? And it's trying to help myself initially, because I developed all these ideas for myself. I didn't kind of go, I want to write a best-selling book. I kind of thought, okay, I struggle with a lot of things in life. What tools are out there to help me? And then by realizing they started to help me, then I realized maybe they could help other people as well. So recognize our humanity, recognize our fragility at times, and we will react, but we don't have to carry out those reactions. I'm not telling people to stop being angry. I'm saying, okay, maybe you are initially angry, but where's that anger going to take you? And one of the safeguards, if you like, to put in place is to get perspective on things, because what sometimes makes you angry is not as big an issue as you sometimes think it is.
Agree. Now, you quickly touched on something, one of your mindsets around change your t-shirt. And
Yeah.
I have to admit that I do use that when I'm on stage. I do a lot of public speaking internationally about my survival. Importantly, what I've learned from it, and then how I put my physical and mental strategies into practice. Because it's a long time, 48 years, to endure what cannot be cured. So when I read some of your principles, it's just feedstock to me. Tim, that's really useful. I will leverage that, not just myself and my daily practices, but also how I help others. So changing your t-shirt concept, just so those that listening understand, every day I go into the wardrobe to get changed. Metaphorically, I could put on 2 t-shirts. One says victim. Tim, you've copped a hard deal. You've just been up all night coughing with your cystic fibrosis, and your diabetes injection has just bled into your work shirt, and you're trying to get your son ready for, and he's lazy. He's a boy, can't get him out the door, and everything's boiling point. Now, which t-shirt do I put on, victim or survivor? And I will, most of the time, I'd say actually 100% of the time, because the victim one just isn't my gig, I pull out the survivor one, and that is my mindset for the day. And I bookend the day with how I project myself to the world. That's an internal dialogue, bookending. And then when I'm out the door, I then portray that to the rest of the world. And I take personal responsibility for that mindset.
I think that's, it's phenomenal. I mean, we're dealt a set of cards in life, and as I've heard a number of speakers say, it's not the cards you dealt, it's how you play your hand. that really matters. And you could look at your cards, and perhaps other listeners could look at what life's dealt them as a set of cards and go, I ain't got many aces there. But maybe the ace we all have is the ace of self-awareness and recognizing, if I take a little bit of responsibility, that doesn't mean I've got to do it all by myself, but if I seek support and take some ownership, particularly for my mindset, your mindset matters massively in so many situations. And I've just had some contact with I call him a lad, really. He's the son of some friends of ours, but he's playing professional football in the US at the moment and just scored an amazing goal over the weekend. But a year ago, he was let go by his team, and he thought he was going to have to give up his dream. And we had some time together when he was back in England, and his hunger and his desire was phenomenal. And he's gone back to the States. He's signed a professional contract. He's playing, in front of some pretty big crowds over in the US, and he could have worn that victim T-shirt, but he hasn't. And it's like, okay, a team's let me go. Is this the end of my career? I'm still gonna give it another shot, and that's what he's done. And for all of us in life, whether we're dealt a good hand or a bad hand or an average hand, it's not just the cards you dealt, it's how you play them that matters. And how you play them is so critically and crucially influenced by that thinking and those internal conversations and that dialogue you have with yourself.
And the fact that you helped this lad, young man, do so well, and he's scored that wonderful goal, and I imagine he's one of many people you've managed to turn around their mindset. And as one has hopefully a long enduring life, those are the moments where you look back and go, I was actually pivotal in helping that person, because I know intuitively that I can help myself by helping others. It's not all about me. I'm not one of Paul's other great acronyms, which is a tote. Talks only about themselves. I love that one. And what I wanted to draw on now is another thing that's super important to me, which is gratitude. That when I bookend the day, often in the bathroom, because it's that one day where it's still silent, just me, you look yourself in the mirror, you can't lie to that person. I am at that point, go through my positive affirmations, but also what am I really happy about? What am I really pleased with that I've got, rather than moan about what I don't have? How have you seen gratitude being super important to you, Paul?
You know what's fascinating just about the whole SUMO message, and I didn't know this when I wrote the book, the word SUMO, not as an acronym, but as a word in Latin, can mean choose. And every day we have, whether we realize it or not, we have a choice, and we can choose to grumble about things. And there are plenty of things in life you want to grumble about, be it the weather, particularly if you live in the northwest of England. You can grumble about politics. You can grumble about 101 different things. You also have a choice, which is to go, what can I be grateful for? And your brain helps you find what you're looking for, but you've got to sometimes tell it what to look for. So if you drive and you're thinking of getting a new car, the car you're thinking of getting, you start spotting them everywhere because your brain is suddenly going, oh, that's relevant and of interest. So you notice it. The world, however challenging life might be for us, the world is pulsating with possibilities and positives. It's amazing. It's still a privilege to walk this planet. It really is. It's a miracle we're alive. I don't know the exact statistics, but the chance of you being you and me being me is like 1,000,000 to 1. There's 1,000,000 sperm or so released, but only one gets to fertilize the egg. And if it had been a different sperm, it would be a different you and me. And we take life for granted. And so what I do every morning and every night, and I've been probably doing this now for about 2 years, is I have what I call my thankful for. And when you say to it, okay, what are you thankful for? But actually my for is spelled F-O-U-R. So I challenge myself every day that I will think of 4 things I am thankful and grateful for. And it's typically based on what happened, that day. And I replay the day, and I come up with my little match of the day highlights, if you like, of good things that happened. And that's the last thing I think about as I go to sleep. When I wake up in the morning, I replay that. And a podcast I listened to by Rangan Chatterjeet, Dr. Rangan Chatterjeet, is he talks about mindfulness and gratitude, and he has these 3 Ps, and he thinks about, okay, what is who's a person that you're thankful and grateful for? So yesterday, I spent part of it in the lakes visiting a family friend, and I'm thankful for maybe particularly my godson Josh, and seeing how he's coaching all the younger children in tennis. So what's maybe a person you're thankful for? What's a pleasure that you may be thankful for from that day? And I was thinking about, my little pale ale beer I had last night when my wife then came back from her weekend away, and we sat and relaxed, and I enjoyed my little pale ale. So I have me thankful for. Chatterjee has this, these 3 Ps. So think of a person, think of a pleasure, and then maybe think of a promise, something that you're looking forward to. And I think it's just all about finding these little tools, these little frameworks, if you like, to get off autopilot and to structure our day in a way that helps set us up for the best possible day we can have, even if the roads are a nightmare, the weather's awful, and everyone around you is irritable. You're going to cope with that better if you start with an attitude of gratitude rather than grumbling. But your brain doesn't automatically find those things to be thankful and grateful for. You need to steer it in the right direction.
I think that's great. And it's a habit you form. We talk about habit forming. It's not just you're thankful for high days and holidays. It's a daily practice.
Oh, I think it has to be. I mean, Zig Ziglar, American motivational speaker, once said, motivation is a bit like having a wash. You're going to do it more than once to get the full benefit. And it's a bit like going to the gym once, isn't it? And looking at your body and going, it didn't work. Life is about those daily disciplines. And I think we sometimes don't like that word discipline. But I'll tell you what, in my experience, and I'm a so-called motivational speaker, but discipline will get you further than motivation. Because motivation might get you started, but it's the daily disciplines that keep you going.
Agree. And I'd liken it to fixing your roof while the sun is shining. Just get these practices in, fix your roof, so that should that lightning storm happen, you're actually in a safer place.
Yeah, absolutely. And life is about being a little bit more proactive and living life more intentionally rather than constantly living reactively and on autopilot.
Now, one thing that I an exponent of that maybe is my own version of a to-do list, I add in 2 other elements, know and feel as well as do. So every day, and I don't write it down because some people write journals, I have a know, feel, do list. What do I want to know? What do I want to feel? And what do I want to do? In your writing, I noticed you have a feelings list.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to think about how do you want to feel about a particular situation. I mean, I think your concept of what I call the KFD, know, feel, and do, is brilliant. And I think about that. I coach people when they're presenting. What do I want my audience to know? How do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do? But again, I think I need to think about, okay, well, if I want to have some good feelings, what's going to influence that? And again, it's going to be so related to my thinking. But I also give myself permission to have some what I call a bit of hippo time sometimes. What do hippos do in mud? They wallow. So I'm not trying to constantly, I want to deal well with life. I want to be the best version of me I can possibly be. Sounds cliche, but I do. And so I know that how I feel can influence that. But what I also need to give myself permission to do is, sometimes it's okay to not always feel okay. To feel mad, bad, or sad is okay. And I would have a thought there might be times for you, Tim, and for those listening, where sometimes with all those tools you've got in place to set you up for a great day, sometimes stuff happens and you go, I need a bit of hippo time here. I need a little bit of a wallow, and I'm going to give myself permission to have that, because I don't think it's helpful to suppress those emotions that some people might label as negative. You sometimes need to process them and acknowledge them. Digest your disappointment, sit with your sadness. So feelings, I want to develop, healthy feelings, and above all, I think one of the most important feelings to have is peace of mind. But I also want to acknowledge that there are times when life's just throwing a lot at me, and I give myself permission to have some hippo time and have a bit of a wallow as well.
And I certainly think of your hippo time. I sadly, with cystic fibrosis, people die far too early. It's very tragic, and ones I've become very close to, when they do pass, I definitely feel the need just to be mindful of them, but also harness the motivation to keep my own journey going.
Yeah.
Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, no, I mean, grieving is necessary. And I think what's really unhelpful from some so-called motivational self-help gurus is this denial of the negative side of our emotions and suppress our pain, and let's be positive and look at ourselves in the mirror every morning going, I'm a tiger, I'm a tiger. I think sumo is giving people a set of tools, and you don't cut the hedge with the lawnmower. So it's a brilliant lawnmower. It's a fantastic lawnmower, but there's a context to it when it works.
Yeah.
And I think I like to give people tools and also a large dose of reality and honesty, and acknowledge that, seriously, particularly with a bereavement, you will need to grieve. And all of a sudden that question, where is it on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10's death, is not an appropriate question to even think about. So allow yourself grief. But there's also that sense in which in life, how do we're still alive on this planet. We've still got the privilege of waking up every morning, even with our challenges that we may have, may they financial, relational, or health. So how do I make the most out of every day? So grieving for those that have gone is a healthy thing to do. But I think sometimes you can spend too long wallowing in the mud over certain challenges you may experience, and you can get stuck in the mud, and that can become your new comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I always go, life is too precious and too short at times to spend too long wallowing. So I give myself permission to have my hippo time, but I also remind myself it's okay, but it's temporary.
Thank you for that, Paul. Now, we talked about mindfulness, and at work, I've been to mindfulness workshops, and I'd say the majority of people in that room intellectually understood that it made sense what mindfulness is, but probably quite a few of them went back to the desk, and the first frustrating email or conversation, they probably reverted back to their previous type or form. Now, you have a great way to frame mindfulness with an object, which is the lowly beach ball. Can you explain that to my listeners, please?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's about mindfulness. It's about a lot of different things. If you were to imagine this 6-colored beach ball and I'm holding it in front of you and you're at one side of the room and I'm at the other, I'm looking at the beach ball and I'm asked what color is it? I'm seeing blue, white, and green. You're seeing red, yellow, and orange. So we're seeing the same thing, but we're seeing it differently. And in terms of using that as a metaphor for our relationships, if I want to build a better relationship with you, with a colleague, with my boss, with my kids, with my partner, or even my ex-partner, I haven't got an ex-partner, but if I did, the reality is sometimes I need to shut up thinking my side of the beach ball is the only perspective there is and move on and explore yours. So sometimes maybe that's an interesting way of framing it as a mindfulness tool, but it's being mindful and aware that how I see the world, how I see the beach ball, isn't necessarily how other people are seeing it. But for me, mindfulness is about just giving yourself a moment to press pause and be still. And we can get so caught up in the activities of the day. And one, I think the best way to develop a habit is to link it with another habit. So don't ask me if this is doing me any good at all. But Norman, the golfer, apparently when he cleans his teeth, he stands on one leg, and it helps with his core stability and maybe helps improve his balance. Bizarrely, I'm glad we haven't got CCTV in my bathroom because I clean my teeth standing on one leg, and I use both my right hand and my left hand sometimes to clean my teeth, because what I'm trying to do is break the routine, break the autopilot, and kind of become very much more present in the moment. Not every morning, I've just started doing this. First cup of tea that I make, rather than I'll be checking my phone while it's brewing, I pour the hot water on the tea bag. I notice the steam coming up. I notice the bubbles on the surface of the tea. And I just take a moment, not to be doing, the curse of multitasking. No, just be still, be mindful, be appreciative of this moment, of this activity. That we have electricity to mean you press a switch and before you know it, 2 minutes later, you've got hot boiling water. That this tea's been provided for you. I even think, some people, maybe of a particular faith will say grace before they eat their food. Well, you could be an out and out atheist, but maybe you want to take a little bit of time to be mindful and be thankful of the food in front of you. And then maybe when you're chewing it, savor the flavor a little bit. And sometimes I think it's very easy to live life with and what's next, rather than sometimes enjoying what's now.
Yes.
So a lot of different ideas there. And the beach ball, I guess, is just about trying to understand other people's perspectives, and the one leg, cleaning your teeth with the opposite hands, which you normally do, and the tea bag, just very, very trivial things, but which are designed to help us, break the curse of autopilot and just fast forwarding through life, and maybe just being a bit more mindful and present in the moment.
And on the subject of being present, is something, as well as the power of the mind, that I'm drawn to. And certainly this podcast is looking to help people understand how they can achieve what sometimes they feel is almost impossible, to appreciate now, because it almost in some ways feels unachievable. Well, what isn't now is now, but actually, how do I achieve that, and what does it feel like? And I, just from what you're saying, can hear you're probably do some sort of meditative practice, or just appreciate what you're seeing and feeling in the moment, those three special words. And it's taking yourself out of there's plenty of time, the future's where all the solutions are. Actually, in the moment, I don't suffer. I've suffered in the past, I will suffer in the future with my health problems, but right now I do not suffer. And if I can build up those pivotal points and present moments throughout the day, I have more days where I feel I am enduring rather than suffering. And so my next question to you is, how can people help themselves with the false belief that there's plenty of time, and just appreciate what they've got in front of them right now?
I think there are obviously be some of your listeners who don't have anything like the kind of health challenges that you face. And therefore you can get complacent. And so it's a visual metaphor I use in my SUMO book. And it's just imagine 7 people stood up in front of you, and each person represents a day of the week. So the first person represents Monday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, etc. But imagine each person doesn't just represent a day of the week, but a decade of your life. So Monday, 1 to 10, Tuesday, 11 to 20, Wednesday, 21 to 30, etc. All of a sudden, those 7 days of the week, which represent a decade of your life, if you are, as I'm about to be, 55, if I started life on the Monday of my life, using this metaphor, I'm now on Saturday afternoon. I'm halfway through Saturday. And it's like, but I'm 55 and I've got years to live. Yeah. But just remember, you are on the Saturday of your life. Now, let's also, remember that Sunday represents 61 to 70. So hopefully we'll get a few bank holidays, bank holiday Monday and Tuesday. But what it makes me realize is the Saturday afternoon of my life can influence how the evening goes, and also how I live this right now can influence what my Sunday might look like, and what my bank holiday Monday and maybe even bank holiday Tuesday can look like. That my choices have consequences. I need to take responsibility for my health and for my lifestyle, because generally we are living longer. There has been a little dip in the last 2 or 3 years, both in the UK and the US, in terms of people living longer. Actually, there's been a bit of a blip in that recently, but generally we are living longer. But living longer doesn't mean we're living healthier. So I need to think, okay, I'm 55. Let's just say I've got a quarter of a century left on this planet. Maybe I'll get to 80. Maybe I'll be fortunate to do that. Maybe I won't, but maybe I will. What can I do that's in my control to make this next 25 years, this next quarter of a century, a good one? And that means taking a bit of responsibility, and that means not taking life for granted, and it means not acting as if I'm invincible. It means actually life is fragile, and constantly thinking about, well, one day I'll ... Well, maybe I need to think about now and about the actions I need to take now. So I think we need to be aware of complacency. And one of my other SUMO principles is called learn Latin, and the Latin phrase I referred to it briefly before, carpe diem, seize the day. Now, metaphorically, seize the day could mean, literally today, but going back to the other previous metaphor, each day of the week represents a decade of your life. I want to seize the next decade of my life, because how I live this decade will influence the next decade.
And I have taken it, and some people think quite fatalistically, to the next level, which is I live every single day like it could be my last. Now, I'm super hoping that it won't be my last, but if I go into today, from what I wear to how I carry myself, it makes me really enjoy the moment more. If you had, the subject of this podcast is the gift, what gift or message would you like to leave listeners with, Paul?
I think ultimately, have kinder conversations with yourself. I think we can be really unhelpful in the kind of conversations we have with ourselves. And I think about 2 questions particularly, maybe to reflect on, how would the best version of myself handle this situation? Or if a friend was in this situation, what advice would I give them? Be more solution focused, but also kinder and constructive in the conversations we have with ourselves, rather than going, I'm a loser. I can't do this. I've never been able to do it. I'm so stupid. Have kinder, more constructive conversations with yourself.
Thanks for that. And how can people find you? Because I reckon that people are going to look for you because of what your advice that you give. What's the best way?
The best way, my website is thesumoguy.com. You can also connect with me via Twitter at the Sumo Guy. And if you're on Instagram, just to keep the theme going, you can find me on at the Sumo Guy. So if you remember the Sumo Guy, you're going to find me one way or another.
Great. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Paul, and maybe the first of many. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening. You can give feedback on the GIFT podcast. Find me on Twitter, Tim Wotton, and also same for Instagram. And as always, I'll finish off with saying, Tim Wotton, yours cup half full. Thanks very much.